Okay, let's unpack this deep dive. We're stepping back to November 2019, to an event that played out so dramatically, right in the heart of London.
Mm-hmm.
You probably saw the images that were, all over the headlines, that struggle on London Bridge, maybe even that, well, bizarre detail about a narwhal tusk being involved.
Right.
But, like with so many of these high-profile incidents, the first story, the immediate one the public hears, it's rarely the complete picture, is it? Or sometimes not entirely accurate.
That's exactly it. Today, we're really going deep into the Fishmonger's Hall attack. And our goal, using the sources you've got there, this collection of articles, notes, different accounts, is to peel back those initial headlines.
Okay.
We want to trace the timeline, figure out what actually happened on November 29th, 2019, and compare that directly to the story the media ran with immediately. We want to see how the truth, according to these materials, differed pretty significantly from the fiction, especially around who the real heroes were that day.
So it's about understanding the different layers, moving past that surface story to the facts as they actually came out later on. Let's set the scene first. It's Friday, November 29th, 2019. The place is Fishmonger's Hall, this, historic building right there by London Bridge.
And it was hosting a pretty unique event. It was the 5th anniversary celebration for the Learning Together program.
Ah, yes.
For anyone who doesn't know, it's this really groundbreaking initiative from Cambridge University. It basically brings together university students and prisoners to study alongside each other. The focus is all on rehabilitation and reform.
Right. So a truly diverse environment inside that hall. Your sources, they paint a picture of the attendees, don't they? A significant mix of people.
Absolutely.
Not just Cambridge academics and students, but you had top judges, security professionals, senior police officers, and, crucially, reformed offenders and current prisoners who are on day release from open prisons.
Yeah, the material mentions over 100 guests and something like 50 staff were there. And within that diverse group was Usman Khan. He was there as an attendee, part of the program. He was actually receiving expenses to be there.
Okay.
The sources even have a photograph of him from the morning session. He's wearing this noticeable padded coat, and the notes mention he seemed somewhat isolated from the others.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some, intriguing speculation in the source material based on that photo. Was he just looking out at the River Thames, or was he maybe focused on something specific in the training materials being discussed, something related to criminal behavior, perhaps?
That immediately adds this sort of unsettling context, doesn't it? You've got this concentration of really significant individuals, judges, police, academics, alongside people actively working through the justice system, all in one room, talking about rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And Khan is there, pictured looking isolated, maybe focusing on something specific. The source even points out that he seemed to ignore some of those incredibly high-profile potential targets who were there all morning.
Which, looking back, is a detail that feels, pretty chilling now.
So the morning session wraps up. People break into smaller groups. The source notes they were just about to come back together for a main session, and get this, they were planning to cut a celebration cake.
And it was during that transition time, around 1:40 p.m., maybe just before 2 p.m., that everything changed drastically.
Right.
Khan left the group, went off to the toilets, and according to these sources, taped a knife to each hand.
Wow.
Now, there's speculation the sources raise here. Did he already have these knives? And maybe what looked like a fake bomb belt, possibly concealed under that padded coat right from the start.
And meanwhile, just minutes before the main attack kicked off, around 1:40 p.m., Jack Merritt and Saskia Jones, two people really deeply involved with the Learning Together program, they had just stepped outside the hall for a cigarette break.
Terrible timing. So Khan comes back into the main area around 2 p.m., still wearing that coat. The attack starts inside the hall itself. The sources place it either in a downstairs meeting room or maybe near the stairway leading up. And there's some speculation offered. Did he perhaps see those elderly judges or senior police nearby as, easier initial targets? Or was he maybe physically blocked from getting upstairs to where another group might have been? The sources aren't definitive on that precise point.
And just devastatingly, Jack Merritt and Saskia Jones were his first victims. Stabbed and killed right there inside the hall, Saskia was found fatally wounded, slumped on the stairway.
Yeah, the sources mention Amy Ludlow shouting desperately, "Police! Ambulance!" And Andy, the building's maintenance guy, he was also stabbed near one of the exits.
The immediate aftermath inside must have been just chaos, pure shock. The sources describe guests just frozen, others trying frantically to get first aid to Jack and Saskia.
Absolutely. And this moment right here is where that initial media story really starts to get challenged by the details in your sources. Because the people who stepped up in those first terrifying seconds inside the hall, they weren't necessarily the ones the headlines focused on later.
That's the crucial difference, isn't it?
It really is. According to this material, several individuals reacted almost instantly. Take James Ford. He's a convicted murderer. They're on day release from prison.
Right.
The sources show his very first action was trying to save Saskia Jones, actually performing CPR on her right there on the stairway. Then, despite being on day release, he goes after Khan.
Incredible. And John Crilly, another ex-offender from the program.
Yeah, John Crilly. He physically took Khan on. First, he used a wooden lectern he grabbed, then he got hold of a fire extinguisher. And the sources highlight this. Crilly apparently thought Khan had a real bomb strapped to him.
Oh, wow.
Yet he confronted him directly, shouting at him to blow it, basically daring him.
This unbelievable bravery.
Then there's Lukas Kococek, the Polish kitchen porter. He heard the screaming, grabbed a long 7-foot pole described as maybe wood, maybe metal, and used it to prod and try to distract Khan.
Okay.
For doing that, he was viciously slashed and stabbed 5 times.
Oh, man. And Darren Frost, he was a Ministry of Justice employee, also there.
That's right, Darren Frost. He saw Khan confronting another delegate with the knives. Frost grabbed something off the wall, one of those narwhal tusks, and used it to confront Khan.
And this is where Khan says that really strange, unsettling thing confirmed in the sources.
Exactly. Khan says, "I am not here for you. I am here for the police. I am waiting for the police."
Chilling.
And that detail about the tusks, it gets complicated right away because the sources show conflicting accounts. QC John Samuels, who was also there, initially suggested it was reformed offenders who grabbed and used a tusk.
Okay.
But then Darren Frost later gave an interview stating very clearly that he took both tusks off the wall. The sources even note that another attendee, Brian Bain, a U.S. visitor, was apparently handed a tusk by Frost but seemed to wait, rather than immediately jumping into the pursuit.
Huh. So, right from the start, there's confusion and contradiction in the eyewitness accounts about something as specific as the tusks.
Precisely. It shows how messy these things are in the moment.
And QC Samuels offered this really powerful observation in the material, didn't he? Speculating on why some of the reformed offenders might have reacted so fast, so instinctively.
He did. He suggested that their years spent, quote, on the wings of violent jails might have given them a kind of heightened awareness, maybe a readiness to confront danger that others, who he described as being mesmerized in shock, just didn't have in that moment.
Which really flips the script on who we typically think of as a hero, doesn't it?
Completely. And the sources also note that eventually the more sort of official attendees, the judges, police, security people, they managed to get out of the hall via the kitchen area. Some were apparently taken to a nearby building, maybe a designated survivor center. It hints maybe at a difference in how various people were handled immediately after, compared to, say, the general guests or staff.
Meanwhile, the whole confrontation spills outside, onto London Bridge itself. Security guards, despite attacks on the reception staff near them, managed to get that heavy front door open. Khan runs out.
And he's pursued initially by Crilly, a guy named Conway, Lucas, and Andy.
But Lucas and Andy, they were both wounded.
Right, exactly. So they had to stay behind with security near the bollards outside the hall. And James Ford, who started by trying to help Saskia, he seems to kind of drop out of the narrative of the actual pursuit onto the bridge, at least based on the accounts we have here.
So out on the bridge, Khan turns, faces the people chasing him. And the sources stress he keeps repeating that phrase, "I am waiting for the police."
Yeah, which has widely been interpreted as him deliberately seeking that confrontation, wanting armed officers to shoot him, essentially achieving martyrdom as a terrorist.
And the people who chased him out, they didn't give up.
Not at all. Crilly used that fire extinguisher again, spraying it at Khan to keep him off balance. Darren Frost kept prodding him with the tusk he had. And then a man identified in these sources as Mort Conway, or sometimes referred to just as Mohammed in some early newspaper reports, who the sources are quite clear, was also likely a reformed offender, wearing a Fishmonger's Hall ID tag. Not just a random kitchen worker from another restaurant, as some papers misreported. He physically dragged Khan to the ground.
Wow, so Conway, another reformed offender, is key in actually tackling him.
Seems so. And other people jumped in too. An undercover transport police officer stepped on Khan's arm, the one holding a knife, to secure it. A tour guide also got involved, though the sources differ slightly on whether he kicked Khan's head or stood on his wrist to help subdue him.
Just ordinary people, police, everyone piling in.
Exactly. And Darren Frost, you can see him clearly in the CCTV images that were released. He's the ginger-haired guy who is physically pinning Khan down, holding him there until the armed police arrive.
Which they did, pretty quickly by all accounts.
Yep.
Armed units swarmed onto the bridge.
Yes, and the situation reached its, violent end very fast. Officers were shouting, ordering everyone back. Someone yelled, "Bomb!" because of that device Khan was wearing.
Right.
Then shots were fired. The sources mentioned conflicting witness reports again on the exact number. Some say 2, some 3, others just repeatedly shot. One specific witness apparently heard 4 shots, then a pause, then 2 more. It was clearly, given the bomb threat, a shoot-to-kill situation.
And Khan was killed right there on the bridge. Darren Frost was pulled off him by the police literally moments before they opened fire.
That's right, and the device Khan was wearing turned out to be a fake. The sources describe it, based on images seen online later, as looking like a sort of padded jacket rigged up to look like a bomb, although a specific suspect bomb belt was also mentioned in report.
Just designed to cause terror and draw that police response.
Seems likely, and the sources even note some of the forensic details afterwards, like bullet holes being found in a double-decker bus that was stopped nearby on the bridge. An expert suggested a possible ricochet path, which just highlights how chaotic and dangerous that final shootout was.
And this whole sequence of events, particularly who was involved in stopping Khan both inside and outside the hall, this is where we see that really stark difference between the initial media story and the facts that came out later from accounts like the ones you've shared.
It's a massive difference. The immediate story, the one that went absolutely everywhere, focused heavily, almost exclusively, on one heroic figure, often described as a Polish chef fighting the terrorist off with a narwhal tusk.
I remember that headline well.
Exactly. And the sources here suggest a possible reason for that simplification might have been. Well, maybe featuring multiple heroes, especially when many of them were reformed criminals, was just too complex or perhaps too uncomfortable for that instant media narrative.
So according to the sources, it actually took several days, well into December, for that simple initial picture to start breaking down and for a clearer, more complex truth to begin to emerge.
And that truth, as it's detailed in this material, revealed a much more diverse group of heroes than the public first heard about. The key people who actually tackled and restrained Khan included reformed offenders like John Crilly, James Ford, Mark Conway, and that man referred to as Mohammed.
Right.
Alongside them, you had Lucas, the Polish kitchen porter, and Darren Frost, the Ministry of Justice employee. So a whole group of people which directly contradicts that singular Polish chef story.
And Darren Frost's identity, that became part of the evolving truth too, didn't it?
It did. He was confirmed as South African, working in Moje Communications, and he was the one who stated he took both tusks off the wall. This was quite different from some early speculation that the tusk wielder might be American or maybe a reformed offender himself, or even getting him mixed up with James Ford because of apparently similar hair color in grainy footage. The sources even raised questions about why Frost took a few days to come forward and speak publicly. They note he locked down his social media accounts and later admitted he'd omitted many details in his first public account. It just adds another layer of, mystery or complexity.
And James Ford, the guy who performed CPR on Saskia and chased Khan initially, what happened to his story in the media?
He seems to have been almost completely written out of the later media narrative, according to these sources. They note he was very quickly transferred from the open prison he was on day release from back to a secure prison. This effectively made him inaccessible to the media who were trying to piece together the story.
So his initial heroic actions were basically sidelined.
It appears so, based on this material, and Mark Conway and the man called Mohammed, confirmed by the sources here as reformed offenders with ID tags from the event, they were crucial in actually getting Khan down on the bridge.
Right, which contradicts those early newspaper reports that misidentified Mohammed as just some kitchen worker from a totally different restaurant nearby.
Exactly. So you see the details of who did what, who actually used the tusks, the sheer number of people involved and their backgrounds. It all became much richer and, frankly, much more contradictory and complex than that first simple headline allowed for.
And the sources, they contain some really peculiar points, don't they? Lingering questions that even after going through all these accounts, remain unanswered just based on this material provided.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like that observation that 3 of the key interveners, Conway, Crilly, and Frost, all seem to have dyed hair, including Darren Frost's appearance apparently changing in later photos compared to the ginger colors seen in the CCTV. The source explicitly flags that as a sort of point of question. Strange detail.
Very strange. And there are other questions the sources leave hanging, like, were the knives Khan used just sitting out in an open cabinet somewhere, easily accessible? Was there something specific discussed in that morning session, maybe related to that symbol Khan was reportedly looking at, which apparently Bing Chat suggested represented a snake? Did something provoke him or put him in an angry mood?
And the big one, why would a terrorist, seemingly with a bomb, attack the very people involved in his rehabilitation program while ignoring the top judges and police officers who were right there? Was the bomb definitely fake? Or just faulty? Or was it purely intended to terrorize and guarantee a police response? The motive feels unclear in parts.
And that repeated statement, I am waiting for the police, what was the full significance of that? The sources also note, curiously, that Brian Bain's website was later removed and put up for sale. And they question why, after apparently being handed a tusk by Frost, he seemed to wait instead of joining the immediate chase.
Lots of loose ends.
Yeah, and the sources even bring in this analogy to a Darren Brown TV special, The Heist, a mentalist show, to sort of ponder whether elements of the training or maybe symbols present could have somehow subtly influenced Khan's actions. It ties back to that weird observation about the snake symbol he was looking at.
That's quite a leap, but it shows the level of questioning in the source material.
It does, and maybe one of the absolute strangest notes in the sources of this observation, that an unusually high number of readers accessing information about this case online were also registered on some new dating site. The source speculates, could that possibly be some kind of weird coded communication method?
Okay, that's up there. But it highlights that even with numerous accounts, real events can have these bizarre, unresolved elements and strange coincidences that just defy easy explanation.
Oh, absolutely.
So why is it important then for you, the listener, to dive into these specifics, to contrast those initial headlines with the later facts emerging from sources like these?
Well, it's a really powerful lesson, isn't it? It just shows how incredibly quickly major events get reported in our world today, and how those first reports, often driven by the need for speed, can be oversimplified, incomplete, or sometimes just plain inaccurate.
Right.
It really underscores why critical thinking is so vital and why you need to seek out multiple accounts, verified sources, to try and build a fuller, more nuanced picture of what actually happened.
And it really challenges our assumptions about who heroes are or who we expect them to be. This event clearly shows that incredible courage and decisive action in the face of terrifying danger came from people you might not have predicted.
Exactly. The system is actively trying to reform former prisoners, standing shoulder to shoulder with ordinary staff members and passersby. It proves that heroism isn't limited to specific roles or uniforms or authority figures.
Yeah.
Ultimately, digging into these sources reveals the messy, complex reality of real-life tragedies. You see how accounts can conflict, how initial stories get shaped by incomplete information, and how some mysteries, some strange details can just linger, resisting easy answers long after the news cycle has moved on.
So we've walked through that minute-by-minute timeline of a truly tragic day at Fishmonger's Hall. And we've seen how that initial, maybe overly simple media story perhaps focused on one hero and a tusk evolved.
Yeah, through the detailed accounts in your sources, it became this much richer, far more complex picture. A picture involving multiple, incredibly brave individuals from such different backgrounds, including many who had themselves spent time inside the justice system. The core takeaway, I think, is undeniable. The real story involved more heroes, many of them reformed offenders, and the specifics of how that day unfolded and who was truly central to stopping the attacker differed very significantly from those first widely broadcast reports.
And that leaves us with so much to think about, doesn't it? Thinking about this whole complex picture, conflicting accounts, the unexpected heroes, those strange unresolved details like the symbols or Khan's exact motivations. What does it tell you about how easily truth can get obscured in the sheer speed of information today, and maybe who we should really be looking to when we think about courage?